Racist bullying, homophobic abuse and a simulated rape of a female officer. After Paul's reports on the fire service for this programme, a damning new official review lays bare the scale of the abuses, which afflict every single fire station in the country.
I was shocked, and I know my team was shocked by some of these behaviours. I do believe this is a watershed moment. It is time for this behaviour to stop.
It is clear that in terms of culture, the fire service has very, very serious problems. Also on News at 10 tonight. Found guilty of murdering 9-year-old Olivier Pratt-Corbel, thanks in part to the courage of a key witness.
I hope he reflects every morning when he wakes up behind bars and every night when he goes to sleep about what he's put Olivier's family through.
In another echo of the old Cold War, a Wall Street Journal reporter is arrested for spying in Moscow. His colleagues say the charge is absurd and outrageous. The mystery of the dead and dying shellfish in the coastal northeast. What is the cause of it? And the Sheffield high-rise estate and why it inspired a hit musical.
It just shows that the story's universal, I think. This isn't the only block of flats in the world.
This is ITV News at 10 with Tom Bradby.
Good evening. It is only a short time since Paul's exclusive investigations for this programme laid bare a culture of misogyny, harassment and even potential criminal behaviour in our fire services. Well, tonight, the Police and Fire Services Inspectorate has set out in shocking detail how such practices infect every single fire station in England. The ugly truths that have been revealed include racist bullying, homophobic abuse, and even an act of simulated rape. Just weeks before Paul's investigation, one fire service he highlighted for its problems had been officially classified as good, which might make you wonder what the inspectorate is for. And according to one whistleblower in Paul's report tonight, that question hasn't exactly gone away.
When I asked him about developing my career, he turned around and said, well, you know what the currency is around here? It's
There's explicit pictures, there's photos of accidents, sometimes you can even see the dead body in the accident.
What was your worry with all of it?
That he'd end up raping me.
Victim after victim has told us of heroes turned harassers. And tonight, the inspectorate confirms that many sent to fight fires are themselves out of control.
ITV have raised some important issues. Personally, I was shocked, and I know my team was shocked by some of these behaviours. I thought and I hoped that some of this behaviour was from the past, dim and distant past. But there's far too many incidents of this type of behaviour still there. I do believe this is a watershed moment. It is time for this behaviour to stop.
Reviewing every fire service in England, the inspectorate has discovered that our reporting is the tip of the iceberg. In one station, they found a senior officer had called a black colleague the N-word. In another, 2 male firefighters joked about and simulated a rape on a female colleague. Homophobic abuse was written on one firefighter's locker. And across the country, staff said complaining meant career suicide, with many perpetrators allowed to retire or resign to avoid sanction, adding up to a toxic culture.
We had bullying, harassment and discrimination reported in every service, and in a quarter of the services we found racism, sexism, homophobia being prevalent.
On our own close inspection, we found firefighters harassing women and allegedly photographing their dead bodies in Dorset and Wiltshire.
Do you accept that your service does seem to have a problem with women?
I don't accept that we have a problem.
And at Tyne and Wear, a firefighter was promoted while under police investigation for rape.
You said when you announced your retirement this month, I firmly believe this is the best fire and rescue service in the country. Given everything we brought to your attention, do you still believe that?
Yes, I do.
In Dorset and Wiltshire Fire and Rescue Service, we found that female colleagues had been sexually harassed by other members of staff, including the assistant fire chief. What did you rate that service in January?
Well, I'll first say that any allegations like that are shocking. You know, sexual harassment at work in any workplace shouldn't happen. So.
It is shocking. What did you rate that service?
So we rated Dorset and Wiltshire as good at the time.
You did. And what about Tyne and Wear then, where we found a serving firefighter promoted to senior management while under police investigation for rape? What did you rate that service?
I believe we rated Tyne and Wear good as well. But we must
You did, yeah. So can you understand why some of the victims say to us, where have you been?
So when we inspect services, we inspect at a moment in time. So if other allegations, other things come up later, we take those into account, and we will be looking at this even harder in future.
And they'll have to, according to one firefighter who told me the inspection of their service, rated good, was rigged.
I think the HMI are being misled. I think people are being hand-picked and brainwashed into what to say. There has been times where things have been put into people's mouths before they've met the HMI.
So management told you what to tell the inspector?
Yes.
Do you think you need to make those inspections more rigorous in order to root out this cultural issue?
Well, I think our report clearly has rooted out the issue. We've noticed the issue. We've been reporting it on 2018. We've made national recommendations. We now have 35 more recommendations, and we will be looking even closer at culture.
Can you guarantee that the public is safe in the hands of every single firefighter in this country?
I think I can guarantee they're safe in the hands of the vast majority of firefighters in this service. I'd like to say 100%, but I can't stand here and guarantee that at the moment.
Tonight, this centuries-old service is facing a very contemporary crisis.
Look, you've done some shocking reports on a number of fronts, but this one really is disturbing for a great many people. You've said repeatedly that ever since you first did it that you were getting more and more people coming, so I guess it probably hasn't surprised you that this culture is so bad. But how do you chisel out something that's just so deeply ingrained, according to this report and your own reports?
Yeah, and it feels, doesn't it, Tom, tonight, as if the same sirens are sounding within both the police and the fire services. There are many parallels here between the findings of this review and the kind of things we've heard about the Met Police, and many parallels too when it comes to the recommendations. So, for example, the inspectorate says that there should be background checks from now on every single serving firefighter. Amazingly, that doesn't happen at the moment. It's completely inconsistent across the country. They also say that perpetrators should be barred from joining other fire services if they're sacked or they have to resign because of misconduct. And the inspectorate wants to be notified from now on of every single serious misconduct case. They didn't actually know about many of the cases in our reporting. There are many other familiarities, though, in their report to us. For example, this idea that there is an old boys club operating within the fire service where women feel it is incredibly difficult to speak out and they are victimised if they do. They mentioned, for example, the fact that women are expected to make the tea still in the fire service. And in fact, when we went in to visit 2 fire services as part of our investigation, it was women who were sent off to fetch the drinks. For many victims tonight, though, this is far more serious than all of that. And I think for both, not just the fire service, but for the victims too, this is a watershed moment in their lives. This is the first time tonight that many of them feel they have been believed.
OK, Paul, thank you very much indeed. It is once again shocking, but thanks for bringing that to us. Now, a self-confessed big-time drug dealer was so intent on hunting down a rival criminal, he didn't care who was on the other side of the front door through which he fired his gun. One of his bullets hit Oliviers Pratt-Corbell, a frightened 9-year-old girl simply trying to hide behind her mother from the commotion outside her house. Well, today, a jury found Thomas Cashman guilty of her murder, thanks in part to the courage of a key witness who came forward to give evidence.
I just want to know what I've done, that's all. All I want to know is what I'm arrested for.
But Thomas Cashman knew exactly what he'd done.
You're under arrest on suspicion of murder and a suspicion of attempt murder twice. Right, you do not have to say anything.
And this is the moment he realised the police knew as well.
OK?
Yeah, well, I haven't committed no offence. I haven't committed no offence what you're talking about.
Right.
Thomas Cashman had murdered a 9-year-old girl. As 2 men burst into her home, one of them firing a gun, Olivia Pratt-Corbell's last words were, "Mummy, I'm scared." Today, a jury found 34-year-old Cashman guilty of her murder. As Olivia lay dying in her mum's arms, he ran away. As Cheryl Corbell left court today, she held a pink teddy in the air and said she was feeling ecstatic to have justice for her little girl. As a family, they have sat through day after day of devastating details and denials from the man who murdered her.
He's a coward. He's despicable. He made great play in the trial that he is a dad, and yet he's put Olivia's family through this trial. I hope he reflects every morning when he wakes up behind bars and every night when he goes to sleep about what he's put Olivia's family through.
This was the night chaos came to Kings Heath Avenue. In the darkness, Thomas Cashman, seen here with the reflective strips on his trousers, is chasing after another man and firing a gun. His intended target was a convicted criminal called Joseph Nee. On the 22nd of August last year, Cashman spent the day looking for Nee, driving his white van around Dovecot in Liverpool and making trips back and forth on foot. In court, Cashman claimed that he was a high-level cannabis dealer and that these were journeys he made every day, but the jury didn't believe him. That evening, Joseph Nee went to watch the Liverpool game at his friend's house, but when he left to walk home just before 10 p.m, Thomas Cashman was waiting outside. As Nee turned left onto Kings Heath Avenue, Cashman ran up behind him and started shooting. Injured, Joseph Nee stumbled to the ground. Thomas Cashman stood over him and fired again. But somehow, possibly because his pistol had malfunctioned, Nee was able to get up and run away. It was at that moment that Cheryl Corbell came out of her house to see what all the noise was. Joseph Nee made a dash for her open front door, and Thomas Cashman ran after him, now shooting from a second gun.
People that live on Kings Heath Avenue, Olivia's neighbours, described the panic and the chaos of that night, looking out of their windows and seeing two men, one dressed from head to toe in black, chasing the other with his arm out in front of him. They described hearing bangs, loud bangs, gunshots, and they described hearing screams. One woman said they were the worst screams she had ever heard in her life.
As Olivia's family and neighbours tried desperately to save her, Thomas Cashman ran away. He went to the house of a woman he knew and confessed to shooting Joseph Nee. Her decision to tell police what she knew played a huge role in securing Cashman's conviction.
Our experience as senior detectives is one of the bravest things we've ever seen, and I hope tonight she looks herself in the mirror and said she's really proud of herself because she's assisted the police in successfully prosecuting and convicting Thomas Cashman.
Thomas Cashman was driven away from court this afternoon with an armed police escort. He'll be back here to be sentenced on Monday. His conviction has brought some justice for a little girl who was killed as she stood on the stairs in her pyjamas at home, somewhere she had every right to feel safe. Chloe Keedy, News at 10, Manchester.
Police are tonight continuing to question 3 people on suspicion of conspiracy to murder over a father and son shot dead at separate addresses in Cambridgeshire. Police were called to the houses in villages about 6 miles apart after neighbours in both places reported gunshots. The men were named locally as Gary Dunmore, who was 57, and his 32-year-old son Josh. A man and a woman were later arrested at a hotel near Cambridge, while another man was held by armed officers in the Worcester area. In an act unprecedented since the days of the Cold War, an American journalist has been arrested in Russia accused of spying. Evan Gershkovich, a correspondent for the Wall Street Journal, was detained while allegedly trying to obtain classified information in the city of Yekaterinburg. The White House has condemned the arrest, while the newspaper says it vehemently denies the allegations and is demanding his release.
Evan! There was only the most fleeting glimpse of the American at the centre of this diplomatic row between Russia and the United States. Evan Gershkovich led out of court after a brief hearing, his face barely visible under a hood. An accredited journalist for the Wall Street Journal, now accused of being a spy. A Russian Foreign Ministry spokeswoman said his activities, in particular everything that happened in Yekaterinburg, did not correspond to the declared status of journalist. It was an activity that can't be called journalism. It's not journalism. Gershkovich's lawyer was unable to attend the brief court hearing. He told reporters afterwards he hasn't even been told of the exact charges his client faces, how long or where he'll be held. President Biden was briefed by his national security team this morning.
Charges are ridiculous.
The White House urging all Americans to leave Russia.
As we know, this is incredibly sadly common for Russia to detain Americans, and that's why we've been very clear about Americans not going to Russia. It is not safe for Americans right now in Russia.
It is an echo of the Brittany Griner case, the basketball player who spent 9 months in jail in Russia accused of drug smuggling, before being released in a prisoner exchange with arms dealer Victor Bout. This is the first arrest of an American journalist in Russia since the height of the Cold War decades ago. It's possibly a tit-for-tat retaliation after the charging of a Russian man accused of espionage here in Washington. It might be months before Gershkovich is put on trial, Russia's deputy foreign minister ruling out any quick prisoner deal, saying other exchanges have only happened after sentencing. Dan Rivers, News at 10, Washington.
Rishi Sunak's government unveiled its revamped climate strategy today with a broad package of measures from carbon capture to money for heat pumps, only to see the plans immediately called into question by environmental campaigners. The announcement was forced by an earlier High Court ruling that the government's measures to meet its net zero targets were not adequate. But critics are calling the new look Powering Up Britain plan a Groundhog Day rather than a Green Day. Martin is here to explain it all.
Well, the first thing to note, Tom, is that these plans are not going to bring your energy bill down for a couple of years at least. So the government does say by putting the investment in now, by 2035, they hope to have the lowest electricity prices in Europe. Let's take a look at the trend we're seeing at the moment. Now, renewables like solar and wind here in yellow and blue are on the way down price-wise, whereas fossil fuels are getting more expensive, especially since that invasion of Ukraine. And at the moment, the problem is 3/4 of our energy still comes from oil, gas and coal. So we need to pivot to save money and the environment. Now, we are moving in the right direction to hit net zero. That's where we absorb as much greenhouse gas as we emit. But if we took no further action, emissions would soon start to creep back up. So we do need to change more to stay on track. Now, the government wants technology to come to the rescue. It's pledged £20 billion for carbon capture. That's where carbon, which is released into the atmosphere, is recollected, turned into a solid, and then buried under the ground. There's also £240 million for greener hydrogen technology and the expansion of nuclear, including mini reactors, which the Prime Minister says are quicker and easier to build.
We've decarbonised faster than any other major economy. Today's announcement demonstrates our leadership in multiple areas that are going to help improve our energy security and get bills down.
But critics say there are some missed opportunities. For example, whilst planning restrictions on offshore wind and solar farms have been eased, there's no such help for new onshore wind farms, which have been pretty much banned since 2015. And much of the £1 billion earmarked for insulation has actually already been pledged.
The government is talking about ensuring the insulation of 300,000 homes, but on the government's own figures, they estimate that in the year 2023, there's going to be around 3.8 million households living in energy poverty.
Now, environmental lawyers in this country say they'll take the government to court if they find these proposals don't go far enough. And internationally, there's tensions too. Take a look at this. The US has committed a whopping £316 billion worth of tax breaks for companies to stimulate their green economy. The EU has responded by setting aside £220 billion to fund green enterprises. Today's UK announcements are worth just a fraction of that. And with the Chancellor saying he won't release any more plans until the autumn, there is a fear that we're going to fall behind in the race to cash in on that green market boom.
OK, Martin, thank you very much indeed. Now, the police watchdog today handed over a file of evidence to prosecutors about the fatal shooting of an unarmed black man. Chris Cabba, he was 24, was hit by a single shot from a police marksman after the car he was driving was blocked in South London last October. The Crown Prosecution Service will now consider whether to press criminal charges over his death. There are fresh concerns tonight over a new incident involving large numbers of dead and dying shellfish being washed up along England's northeast coastline. It echoes a similar mass die-off of sea creatures in the same area late in 2021. After investigations then, the government rejected claims that dredging for a new free port had stirred up pollution from the seabed, and that's the line they're sticking to now.
Littered with dead and dying marine life. These bright, colourful beach huts overlooking what should be golden sands. Instead, today, it's a dark and devastating scene.
I've never seen anything like this in 70 years.
It's all going to be gone, there's going to be nothing left. And what about when you bring children to lift the rock pools up? There's going to be nothing there.
Even in this tiny section, I can see thousands of shellfish. There are at least 20 starfish just here, and this is what it's like for a good 100 metres along this coastline. Rewind 2 years ago, and this was how the beach looked. Fishermen here are blaming the construction of a £200 million levelling up free port and the dredging happening for that. The Environment Agency say that given the recent high tides and weather conditions, our experts have concluded it is a natural event, which is normal for this time of year. While we know people are concerned, the combination of recent heavy swell, spring tides and onshore winds means natural wash-ups will occur more often. But that's not catching on.
Right from day one, I have no doubt whatsoever, I've actually put it in writing, 99.9%, it's the dredging activities here in the River Tees.
So you and other scientists don't believe the Environment Agency's theory on why this is happening?
Not a word of it.
A panel set up to look at what caused the first mass die-off say dredging and chemicals were very unlikely the cause.
The chance of dredging for the free port being anything to do with this was respectively less than 1% and less than 10% for capital and routine dredging. And you can see for yourself, if you look at photos of Saltburn, that there is a small deposit of sea coal which is washed up. That is absolutely normal for this time of year, as the Independent Environment Agency has made clear.
But this continues to bring people down to the beach for all the wrong reasons. Kelly Foran, News at 10, Saltburn.
Thousands of people hoping to fly off for an Easter break abroad are facing major disruption because of industrial action. 10 days of strikes by security guards at Heathrow are to go ahead, starting tomorrow after talks to resolve a pay dispute broke down. The walkouts by around 1,400 members of the Unite Union are likely to hit most of the Easter weekend and other school holiday travel plans. Now, if King Charles had any nerves before the first state visit of his reign, they were probably settled by the standing ovation he received after addressing the German parliament today. His speech at the Bundestag, the first by a British monarch and delivered mostly in German, ranged across topics from the war in Ukraine to a shared love of comedy and rock music. Its theme was the enduring partnership and friendship between the two countries.
The Thursday food market in Berlin's Wittenbergplatz doesn't usually look like this, but then usually there isn't a British Queen consort in the crowds with whom to take a selfie.
You can take a few with me to try.
And stallholders selling their cheese had some new tourists who wanted to take some samples home. But the main business in Berlin today wasn't at the market stalls. It was in the Reichstag building, under the giant glass dome designed by British architect Lord Norman Foster. Never has a British monarch addressed the German Bundestag before. Today, one did.
Today, it gives me particular pride to be with you once again. now as king, and to renew the special bond of friendship between our two countries.
And given Britain and Germany's past, he said this particular relationship was close to his mother's heart.
This friendship meant so much to my beloved mother, the late Queen. Meine Mutter wusste, welch enorme Errungenschaft diese Versöhnung bedeutete. Und mit ihren vielen Besuchen in Deutschland wollte sie ihren Beitrag dazu leisten.
And now, he said, Germany and the UK can unite on Ukraine and take military decisions together which might once have seemed unimaginable.
Die Geißel des Krieges zurück in Europa. Der Angriffskrieg gegen die Ukraine hat unvorstellbares Leid über so viele unschuldige Menschen gebracht.
Whether the King was speaking in German or English, the speech here, approved by the British government of course, sought at every turn to solidify relations between Britain and Germany. But even a monarch could not avoid mention of one great Anglo-German rivalry, the football.
Fußballmannschaft. Vor diesem Hintergrund war es etwas ganz Besonderes, dass die englische Frauenfußballmannschaft, die Lionesses, mit einem Sieg gegen Deutschland Europameister wurde.
Applause in Germany for an English footballing victory. The royal charm offensive this week appeared to be working. Chris Ship, News at 10, Berlin.
The King is a dab hand at table football. Well, you learn something new every day. Now, finally, the huge concrete high-rise estate that dominates the skyline in Sheffield was controversial for years. Now, though, it is listed status as a landmark example of brutalist architecture. But all through its history, the people who lived there developed a fierce sense of community. And now a musical celebrating them and the place where they live is up for 8 Olivier Awards, Theatreland's Oscars.
For more than 60 years, it has inspired both wonder and dismay.
As the dawn breaks over roofs lanes.
And this weekend, the musical, inspired by the Parkhill estate in Sheffield, is up for some of British theatre's biggest prizes.
The light creeps over the house.
I'm starting over, not running away.
Amongst the Olivier nominees for Standing at the Sky's Edge is the award-winning singer-songwriter Richard Hawley. His job to soundtrack the post-war history of this city landmark.
They were basically clearing the slums, but I think it was some kind of like concept to attract people to the idea of it, because blocks of flats then were kind of alien.
You will have grown up here very much aware of Parkhill, like I think pretty much everyone in Sheffield.
Yeah, you couldn't miss it.
Parkhill, eventually housing 2,000 people, was built in the 1950s, a then groundbreaking solution to the housing crisis. But the council estate became run down and crime-ridden in the 80s. Now listed and the subject of a vast refurbishment, Hawley says this Sheffield story speaks to a much wider audience, evident in the sell-out shows at the National Theatre in London.
It wasn't like just a Sheffield Northern audience that had gone down to see it. I listened to accents from all over, well, the world actually, but all over Britain, and they got it, you know what I mean? And it just shows that the story's universal, I think. This isn't the only block of flats in the world.
I'm going downtown where there's music.
Richard Hawley has sung about his home city in his solo albums, has played with Sheffield bands Pulp and Arctic Monkeys.
Have a look at one of these refurbished flats.
And next step, getting the approval of Parkhill residents like Joanne for the musical.
It took me back. Well, like looking, do you know, through a photo album from being a young kid. But somebody turning it into a video and putting it on stage.
Oh God, you've made it.
Honestly.
Every single thing.
Honestly.
Thank you so much, because that's
Honestly.
validate. I don't care about
Honestly.
reviews and what people say. What you just said,
Honestly.
that's enough for me.
I'm going to look after you. And Olivier wouldn't be too bad either. Nina Nannart, News at 10 in Sheffield.
Well, really good luck to them. May they scoop the Oliviers. That is sadly pretty much all we've got time for tonight. But thank you very much for watching, and good night.